poll showed that the quality of voters in Boston wanted the next mayor. The most important one was honesty. And essentially, they have voted that way since. So I know it may sound utopian. I hope and trust that even the United States, the UK, or anybody else will fail to vigorously try to enforce their national laws. But it seems to me that it would be very valuable to have an elite group of investigators who operate internationally and expert in tracing money, that it would be valuable to have an elite group of international prosecutors. They were assembled at Nuremberg, Lord Shawcross and Robert Jackson, and to have a court before which the highest officials, the corrupt counterparts, Milosevic and Taylor, would fear they might be brought. And I think 100 countries are signatories to the United Nations Convention Against Corruption. 39 are signatories to the OECD Convention. And it's not clear to me whether Russia has signed that. Did sign it 2 months ago. But there's a kind of positive law there. And arguably even a respect for national sovereignty. Because if you're Russian or Gavin, do you have a sense it would be more fair when some multilateral group has decided that one of your officials should be prosecuted in The Hague or Belgium, or when some United States attorney in Brooklyn has felt that you should be called into court there. So, not having vast international experience, but having some activity in the last year, that's what has occurred to me.
Thank you very much. But it sounds like utopia in a way, an elite group of investigators who will just travel from country to country to root out corruption, then bring people to the national court. But we definitely see the contours of the world government. Let me return to the questions. Sergey Belov, Faculty of Law, St. Petersburg State University.
Thank you. I have. So I have partly question, partly comment. When we talk about this British law, British Act on bribery of 2010, do we talk about some political action or about legal act? In what sense? In a very strict legal problem. I mean investigation, I mean taking evidences for criminal prosecution. That's the very important part of any criminal law, criminal act, criminal statute. And if we talk about transnational and universal jurisdiction, we have to deal with this procedure of taking evidences abroad. And on this way, there are a lot of obstacles for real efficiency of any act, and of this act more than others. If British government will need some cooperation with governments abroad, take Russia as an example, you will see at least two problems. First, how wide is the interpretation of this hospitality, and the other one is trying for government not to show all this corruption practice. You know that in Russia, as in most of states, briberies, corruption is one of the most latent most latent crime. And investigation even inside Russia, even inside authorities, state authorities, makes a lot of problems for prosecutors, for investigators, and doing this with cooperation with other governments would be a lot of political meaning and a lot of political obstacles for real efficiency. And the part of my question is that I would like to ask if these questions were discussed during the passing of this act in British Parliament and how it is seen by experts in Britain, how it will work on, from this prospect. Thank you.
Well, in terms of discussion, these things weren't discussed. Let me, in my own mitigation, say, firstly, I was not involved in this legislation before the election at all. And there wasn't much discussion before the election. There was universal agreement that this was a very good thing. Before elections, all politicians are in favour of motherhood. This was motherhood, it was against corruption, everybody voted enthusiastically for it. And nobody gave the slightest thought to how it was going to be implemented. After the election, I found myself, to my surprise, Secretary of State for Justice. I thought I was supposed to be going to be Business Secretary, but we didn't win the election properly. So I found that I was now responsible for implementing this act, whereupon I ran into this wave of criticism, which we dealt with, and I think we have satisfactorily dealt with it. And I concede this to our chairman, that the next step is to implement it. And we can't just sit, it was passed partly because we were under pressure from the OECD. To be fair, there is international pressure. The American government was very concerned that we had no equivalent Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, and British politicians did agree. Most of the British politicians agreed it would be a good thing to have legislation equivalent to the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. Now we're in the difficult business of enforcement. Not my department, I could say, as a minister, as ministers usually do, that falls to my colleagues, but actually I am involved. And what the government is now trying to do is strengthen our ability to do organised crime of all kinds through the National Crime Agency. And a very important part of that is strengthening our ability to do financial and commercial crime. The serious fraud office that we have, which is our specialist agency, is not good enough. And a great discussion is going on amongst my colleagues about how to get a specialist part of the National Crime Agency to enforce it. Now that I see it in proceeding practice, what is the case I would like to see brought? So I can turn to Judge Wulf and say, we're in line with the Americans. It does require cooperation in overseas government. You will get complaints from competitors. We will get some evidence, some complaints from people who made a bid for power station construction. It was a better bid, and they were beaten by some unlikely company that just seemed to know the finance director or the minister better than they did. But it's quite difficult to prove that. Easy to find, I agree with Judge Wulf, that some unlawful inducement was given in order to get the weakest bid to win. Now what I would like, let's get an example of Russia, and there are, I think Russia has a reputation of having a problem. There are others, I could take Bulgaria, you don't have to go too far from Europe to find difficult places. What I hope will happen is we will have a prosecution in Russia of an official who has taken an illegal bribe. And in parallel, that will get the British to prosecute the British company which turns out to be giving this bribe. We can make the giver of the bribe criminally responsible, and you can make the receiver. Pretty much as a Russian company might bribe a British. In which case, the same thing happens. We prosecute the official. The two authorities should cooperate in actually making sure that the respective laws are applied. Now, we have not had anything like that simple situation present itself yet, but I think there are countries where that would happen, where we just have to extend the number of companies where the culture is so hostile to corruption that the authorities in both countries will cooperate in order to get law enforcement. Then we'll start prosecuting. In the case of Gabon, you're President Bongo and his family are amongst the richest people in the world, and one of the poorest countries in the world, and they were very, very happy in Gabon because they thought everybody else's rulers behaved in that way and nobody did anything about it, and the money was mainly given by French companies who did very well in Gabon. You were never going to get a prosecution in Gabon. With a bit of evidence, you might have got a prosecution in America or Britain if somebody could produce evidence, in that case against whatever company, blatantly giving bribes. And I've been to Gabon, the bribe giving was pretty blatant in Gabon, and there was no secret about what was going on. And we've got a law now. We could. The best thing would be to cooperate with the authorities in another country, where they're trying to purge their officials, and we're trying to purge and raise corporate standards in Britain. It's too easy otherwise. All our companies turn around and say everybody else does it. You can't trade in Gabon without giving bribes, so it's quite unfair to make it all the stuff about hospitality, it's a smokescreen. Please. And we just have to protect against that by not prosecuting city cases, which just turn on hospitality as a rugby match, which is not what we're talking about.
Thank you. According to the rest of the question, then I would like to give the floor to ИПП Элла Панеях, Institute of Law,
In the Institute for the Rule of Law, we study sentencing.
Can you switch on?
In the Institute for the Rule of Law, we study sentencing process in Russia. This is one of our projects. And as part of this project, I happened to interview a police officer, a detective, who works for a special force that fights corruption within state police. And of course, he gave me very many beautiful stories about like hidden cameras and all like detective work he does. And I just asked him, who would be your typical client? Who would be prosecuting normally? Well, a principal of a public school, a director of kindergarten, a teacher in the university who would collect bribes for giving like good marks to their students, a director of public hospital or public clinic. These are typical like bribers that he can prosecute. Why? Because these are only public officials that are not protected by like privilege. I was very interested in what the privilege is. Now, why wouldn't you like prosecute some real official from regulated authorities, from police? Is it a lot of political pressure? Is it dangerous for you? It feels like, come on, everything is much, much simpler than this. If I prosecute someone who is a real person, with a real position within state apparatus. First, the prosecutor wouldn't be eager to help me out, to accept this case. Second, the judge wouldn't automatically look him for the trial detention. And I don't know how to prosecute a person who is not locked up. And there would be a real lawyer, and so on, and as a result, the guy can get acquitted, and if he is acquitted, I am in huge trouble, because with one acquittal for a police officer is a big, big trouble. Now, this doesn't sound as a privilege for most of the people, right? This sounds as a due process. And this is how the privilege works in a society like Russia. If you want to prosecute a state official, you need to pass through a due process that is not available for other people, for normal, like criminal, for normal defendant. And because the whole criminal justice system works in a way that is not fit to the due process, the guy would be acquitted in a very like Now, with this way of criminal justice system, with this way of work for the criminal justice system, what Russian legislators try to do when they think about fighting corruption. I completely agree with Sir Дэвид Стил. They would cut off the rest of discretion from the officials that apply the law. They would pay officials more. This is not a smart thing to do. Like low-level officials get paid more. They don't need bribes. Fine. And they will create another power, another department to fight corruption, with powers to fight corruption. And as a result, corruption gets more centralized. So the privilege to be corrupt goes to those on the top, those fighting corruption, and having this power. Corruption gets outsourced, and so this beautiful piece of legislation wouldn't catch the outsourced corruption when we just have an international company to pay for like real legal service, for example, to pay a lawyer to help to go through the procedures. And actually this lawyer just shares with the people who in regulated funds, for example, these procedures. And on the side of an international company, this is completely legal payment. Nothing criminal can be shown on their side. So I'm afraid that corruption in systems like Russia is always just, a side effect, an outcome of something like deeper bad, or some deeper bad things going on. That's it.
Thank you, Ella. It was a pretty clear sociological exposition subject. Before we turn the floor to give the floor to another expert, maybe there's some more questions or remarks from the audience.
У меня вот один вопрос. Лев Савукин, британские коллеги. Не могли бы они привести примеры судебной практики на основе данного закона, который мы рассматриваем, относительно британских компаний, функционирующих за рубежом, то есть осуществляющих процесс взятых
I just said that there was no notice.
We've just admitted that we only implemented this in July last year, and we have not had a case yet. We've been discussing the problem. The problem is going to be in court. I would actually say we don't have state privilege, and I disapprove. I don't understand how any politicians in any country can keep a straight face when they argue for state privilege and prosecution. Sylvia Berlusconi tried, Jacques Chirac maintained it till he fell from office. We have no state privilege. In the last 2 years, 6 members of parliament have been sent to prison, not for this kind of corruption, but for illegally claiming expenses for their job. Some from the government party, some from the opposition party, or in prison. My colleague, the Secretary of State for Energy, recently resigned because he was facing a criminal trial. You may think this is rather remarkable. It was over a traffic speeding offence. And he's actually been prosecuted, and he's had to resign because he is accused of getting his wife to claim that she was the driver when he was not. Now, I actually would claim for Britain that there are very few countries in the world where a cabinet minister would actually be driven from office and prosecuted by a little local prosecutor for fiddling his speeding offence. But I don't think we have any corrupt cabinet ministers. We have in the past had corrupt city bosses of the American Association, Chicago type, or the Marseille type. I can think of some notorious ones in my lifetime. 2 went to prison, 2 from the northeast. They were prosecuted and sent to prison. 1 is still living happily in his retirement in or around Liverpool, I'm sure. We've had some crooked newspaper apparatus, one of whom is now in prison in Canada, thanks to the Americans. The other threw himself off a boat when he was about to be prosecuted. But powerful people do get prosecuted in the United Kingdom, but not for this international bribery. Which is why we need the Bribery Act. We need the cooperation of other countries. If you have privilege, if after a senior official claim privilege from prosecution whilst they're in office, the situation is impossible. If I were here, I would campaign saying there is no honest argument for claiming state privilege, abuse of power, claiming state privilege. In my personal opinion, as a British politician who is not used to anybody in the country claiming they're above the law. The only person above the law in the United Kingdom is the Queen. But I don't think the Queen has ever engaged in any corrupt practice.
I don't think Ella was talking about privilege.
You don't have, well, some countries do have these.
She was talking about protection. She was talking about the level at which people get protection from their political allies.
I see. I think you meant legal immunity.
Therefore, if there's no immunity, that somehow the prosecution goes away. And I think one of the difficulties in Russia, if I may respectfully say so, particularly in the criminal justice system, the corruption has got into that as well. There are corrupt judges, quite a lot. And cases, particularly in criminal field, miraculously disappear. So, in order to, I think you make a point that I was making earlier. The last thing you want to do is to encourage your authorities to attack the little man who's tipped the person who doesn't want their child in the kindergarten. You're after bigger fish than that. As soon as you start opening up bribery to any kind of facilitated things, you're going to encourage the policeman to take the easy option. I defy anybody in this room to get through Islamabad airport without paying a bribe.
We start running out of time, but I still would like to give the floor to Maxim Wulf, who is professor of economics department, also happens to work for the Royal Letters Podcast. Not anymore. Okay.
Yes, my answer is that. But I would like to come back to yes, the question. Basically, why there was no prosecution yet on the act. Understanding by reading that there was provision made in the Bribery Act in Britain allowing companies to implement, because in order to have defense against the possible offense in corruption, companies have to implement certain compliance procedures and train the staff properly. And I don't know what was the line for that, but I know that, well, I left RBS just a month ago, so I had to pass my last test on compliance with this law yet in March. So not all this stuff, RBS is is a de facto government state bank, and we still kind of, we're being trained in March, yet in March. So well, legally until then, I think it was not even possible to prosecute RBS and put in arrest and corruption against that. Well, what I was going to say, my understanding, because there were quite a few points raised here that Mr. Lebedef raised this point about the fighting like global corruption, etc. But I think this act, the Bribery Act, in the first place, that is the British trading space, and so that I think the ambitions are much smaller in this particular case. But what I like, well, in principle, I would say this way. I like the idea that, say, a German company, driving a Spanish company, and having an office in London can be basically prosecuted on the basis of basically prosecuted for corruption in London. So that's, I think, one of the good things. like ideas put into this Bribery Act. So it's, on the other hand, saying back to your question, you were saying like in Russia, yeah, like the understanding of what's appropriate to hospitality and what's not. There is a provision in the Act as well. Basically, if a person get caught bribing a foreign official, for example, will be judged on what's acceptable and deemed reasonable in the United Kingdom, unless it's written firmly in the local law. So basically, if there is no law firmly stipulating what's appropriate, what's not in Russia, then if like a British person would get caught giving a bribe, he will be obviously owe, and not employee of a British company, not necessarily a British person. The company will be prosecuted on the grounds that it's not acceptable in the United Kingdom. Another point I'd like to make, completely different spaces. It's interesting that in theoretical economics, the vast majority of research basically treats corruption as an abuse of public office. And from that perspective, the Bribery Act basically extends beyond the scope of public office into the private, the function of the private office, which I think great, because there is literally no research trying to theoretical economics trying to build models of that assumption. And finally, speaking about Russia, I find it, I think another reason to fight corruption is that it's just coming to gradually. That obviously everyone knows that it has quite a bad history over the last 10 years of inflation in the country, one way or another. And your example is, you gave an example of basically Spanish wine is opposite the same. Higher prices than really loss. And I think it's like judging by what's different economic experts discuss. We need it's one of the reasons for inflation in Russia because the margin, well, basically it erodes the capacity place of the economy, and it's one way or another it leads to higher margins in prices, and in the end we have to go to inflation. But because just my understanding is that 10 years or like 15 years, it's not really like the long term for actually really realizing what the global inflation is in our country. So you just like even central bank now starts trying to kind of start thinking about cutting interest rates, etc., etc. So you're just coming to that problem really. And suddenly at some point it will pop up that one of the problems of inflation in our country is corruption as well. So that's the competitive, how the economy functions. And the final point, like everybody knows, obviously, that the problem with our country is not really an absence of laws targeting against corruption, but more like the fact that it's perfectly possible to avoid being punished. From that point of view, again, I was quite surprised that in the Bribery Act, in British Bribery Act, basically, on summary conviction in corruption, you get 12 months up to 12 months of imprisonment and I think £5,000 fine. And on the conviction and indictment, you get up to 10 years. And if I remember correctly, back in the Soviet Union, we had that if the party official get caught giving a bribe, it will be good face death sentence. Is it right or not? I think there were quite a few cases back in the 70s. And that's quite interesting, I would say. We still have, I'm pretty much sure that the Soviet Union corruption in public office was much higher than Britain without the Bribery Act. But there was the question again, not like the possibility of facing death sentence, but basically unavailability of expansion. Thank you.
Thank you, Maxim. At this point, I've been told that Secretary of State has another event scheduled, and he has to leave. Thanks very much. Your competence and and your remarks not only broadened our expertise but gave us some more hope that actions against corruption are not in vain. Thank you. We can still continue our exchange here in a more informal way.